Hey guys, tonight we travel to the heart of ancient civilization, the glorious, powerful, endlessly fascinating city of Rome. You might imagine marble columns, pristine togas, and glorious sunsets over the Forum. But tonight, let's talk about something a little less Instagrammable. You see, while Roman history is full of drama, warfare, and emperors who thought they were gods, there's one detail your textbooks usually leave out: it reeked. Seriously. The kind of reek that hits the back of your throat and makes you question your life choices. The Romans may have invented roads and concrete, but they never quite figured out what to do with their poop. And guess what? You're there now, wandering barefoot down a sun-baked street in your simple tunic, the air thick with the smell of sweat, animal fat, and something you hope isn't human. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto a street that's been here for over 1,000 years, and right away you realize, this is going to be an olfactory experience. The paving stones are uneven, slick in places, and darkened with centuries of grime. Somewhere nearby, a donkey is losing its mind. Or maybe it just smells what you're smelling. You're in a residential neighborhood, maybe not far from the Subura, one of Rome's most densely packed and notorious districts. Even the buildings seem to be sweating, their walls stained and crumbling at the edges. The air clings to your skin like damp wool. And the scent? It's a symphony of awful. There's something earthy, not the good kind of earthy, like fresh soil, but more like, someone tried to bury something and failed. Over that, there's a sharp, acrid sting, the scent of fermented things. Old wine, spilled olive oil, pee, and yes, definitely poop. You look up at a second-story window where a clay pot hangs ominously. You remember something. Romans sometimes dumped their chamber pots directly into the streets below. You take a cautious step back, just in time to hear a splash somewhere to your left. Narrow escape. There's no formal trash collection system. If something dies, an animal, or something worse, and no one claims it, it stays. Maybe someone kicks it into a corner. Maybe not. You try not to look too closely at the dark pile near a wall. It's buzzing with flies, and something is definitely moving under there. A cat slinks by with a half-eaten rat in its mouth. Standard Tuesday in Rome. You start to walk, breathing shallow. Every so often, a pocket of what might have once been fresh air drifts past, maybe from a bakery. But then it's immediately overtaken by the hot stench of sweat-soaked tunics, burnt meat, and standing water that hasn't moved in weeks. Here's a fun fact to keep you company. The Romans had around 1 million people in their city by the 1st century CE. 1 million mouths eating, pooping, sweating, with no real plumbing for most of them. Scholars still argue whether that number's an overestimate, but even the most cautious guesses put it at way too many people, not enough sanitation. As you pass a stall selling fish that should not be selling fish, unless slimy and questionable is the new culinary trend, you wonder how anyone survived here without constantly gagging. And yet, this is normal. This is everyday life for Romans. You're just the weird one for noticing it. A group of children runs past, barefoot, chasing a hoop. One of them trips and lands in something viscous. He gets up laughing. You consider never eating again. A street performer bangs on a metal drum, drawing a crowd. A donkey relieves itself nearby. No one blinks. You stop to take it all in. The architecture is incredible, the energy electric, but the smell. The smell is its own character. A constant, unyielding presence, woven into every thread of Roman life. They tried, you know. Rome had a sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, but it was designed mostly to drain stormwater and sacred springs, not to handle the daily sludge of a million people. And most people didn't live anywhere near a latrine or public toilet. So, they did what any sensible, overpopulated society would do. They dumped everything into the streets and hoped gravity would take it away. Spoiler, it didn't. The gutters overflow, and with no storm to flush them clean, everything stagnates. Even the breeze is suspicious. You find yourself ducking into a shaded alley, hoping for relief. But the smell changes. Now it's more smoky. Burnt hair, maybe. You spot a barber's pole. Oh, that tracks. Someone's cooking something in a corner brazier, maybe goat intestines. Maybe shoe leather. Either way, your stomach makes a decision. No thanks. And this is just the beginning. The real nightmares are still ahead. In the sewers, in the baths, in the shops that sell fermented fish guts as a seasoning. But for now, you just keep walking, dodging puddles and mysterious liquids, trying to breathe through your mouth without looking like you're gasping for air. The worst part. You kind of start getting used to it. That's the Roman way. The Cloaca Maxima sounds majestic, doesn't it? Ancient engineering, water flowing in grand underground tunnels, civilization's answer to chaos. You'd expect it to be the pride of Rome. And it was, for about 5 people. For everyone else, especially you, currently trying not to step into a pool of something that's definitely alive, it was more like a rumor. A civic myth. Oh yes, Rome has a sewer, people would say, while relieving themselves in the street gutter right outside your window. You crouch down by the edge of the road, not to admire the stonework, but to examine the open drainage channel running along the side. It's shallow, clogged, and full of things that probably had names once. Some sections barely trickle, others bubble suspiciously. And those bubbles, they do not smell like natural spring water. This is Rome's street level plumbing, a system of open drains that relied on gravity and good intentions. Problem is, most streets aren't designed with perfect slope, and even when they are, people kind of ruin it by tossing their leftovers, waste, and regrets into the channel. You follow the gutter for a bit, watching it pass under doorways and disappear into courtyards. Sometimes, it vanishes beneath a stone slab, but don't be fooled. That just means the mess is taking a brief nap before rejoining the open air. You spot a child's sandal floating in one corner. You hope it wasn't attached to a child when it went in. Further down the block, a man walks up to the drain with a bucket. You think, oh good, maybe he's going to clean it out. He dumps the bucket into the drain. Of course. He tips you a nod as if to say, this is just what we do here, and walks off, leaving a slow, greasy swirl behind. You continue wandering and pass by a stone wall carved with faded Latin. Graffiti litters the base. Names, symbols, maybe a crude joke. Scholars still argue whether the graffiti was just entertainment or coded social messaging, a kind of ancient Twitter feed for bored citizens. Either way, none of it mentions the smell, which feels like an oversight. As you reach the forum, the center of political and public life, you expect things to improve. Maybe the elites paid for better maintenance here. They did not. Marble. Statues loom above you like disapproving gods, but even they seem helpless against the olfactory onslaught. A stray dog darts past you carrying what looks like a goat leg. You decide not to follow. Now, about that Cloaca Maxima. It's real. One of the oldest sewer systems in the world. Built originally to drain swampy areas, it eventually became a way to channel runoff, and, occasionally, human waste, into the Tiber River. You can even find its mouth near the riverbank, a dark tunnel of legend. From a distance, it looks impressive. Grand stone arch, wide enough to walk through. Up close, It's a horror movie soundtrack waiting to happen. Water trickles inside with a low, gurgling growl. Rats skitter. The air is damp, mossy, and full of secrets. People didn't really use it directly. Only the wealthiest homes had indoor plumbing connected to it, and even then, it was rare. Most Romans relied on chamber pots, street gutters, and, if you were lucky, a public latrine, which we'll get to in painful detail later. The cloaca maxima was more symbolic than functional. A flex. A "look what we built" moment that ignored the fact that 90% of Rome's daily waste never touched it. And you feel the truth with every step. You cross a small bridge and find a vendor selling fruit. It looks okay, except the flies, and the smell, and the weird puddle forming underneath one of the baskets. You realize there's no refrigeration. Fruit that isn't eaten fast becomes part of the ecosystem. In Rome, every meal has an expiration date of about 20 minutes. The vendor waves a reed fan over the produce, not to keep it cool, but to swat flies off long enough to sell it. You make a polite decline and move on, nose wrinkled. Here's something you didn't expect to learn today. Ancient Rome had a law about where waste could be dumped. It was, technically, illegal to toss your excrement into the street. No one cared. Enforcement was minimal, and you'd need a whole army of sanitation police to stop the daily tide of filth. So, like most Roman laws, it existed mainly for show. If someone died from the smell, maybe an investigation. Otherwise, business as usual. You pass by a small alley with a low arch, the kind you duck into only if you're extremely brave or completely lost. Against your better judgment, you peek in. Instantly, the heat rises. It's like stepping into a sponge. A mixture of oil smoke, mold, and something unnameable wafts out. You make a hasty retreat. You're not that brave after all. As you walk, the sounds of the city blur together, clattering carts, shouting vendors, distant arguments. But the smell, that never fades. It clings. Even your tunic feels different now, like it's absorbing the atmosphere. You wonder if there's a Roman word for smell fatigue. There probably should be. You glance up at the sky, hoping for a breeze. Nothing. Just sun, relentless and hot, baking every foul odor deeper into the stone. It's like walking through someone's armpit after they've run a marathon and eaten too much garum. And speaking of garum, that's coming up soon. And it's going to make everything you've smelled so far feel like a bouquet of roses. But for now, you keep moving, past the drains, past the disappointed cloaca, past another bucket of something unholy being dumped casually near a public fountain. You marvel at how a city so brilliant, so advanced in architecture and law and language, could be so incredibly bad at basic cleanliness. Maybe that's the real Roman paradox. They could conquer nations but couldn't figure out how to stop peeing in the street. And as you turn a corner, the wind shifts. Briefly. Just enough to bring you a breath of something cleaner, like pine, or distant mountain air. It's gone in seconds. But it was beautiful while it lasted. You wouldn't expect a city that stinks like a compost pile on fire to be obsessed with cleanliness, but welcome to Rome, where contradictions are part of the daily scent profile. And that brings us to urine. Yes, your old friend pee. In ancient Rome, it wasn't just something to awkwardly ignore in alleyways. It was an industry. You're walking down a street lined with shops, or tabernae, as they were called. Most are closed for the heat of the day, their wooden shutters drawn. But around the corner, something catches your eye. A big, round stone container with a lip carved into the top. It looks vaguely like a birdbath. It is not a birdbath. This is a fullonica, a Roman laundry. And that container? It's full of urine. Publicly collected. Open to the air. Warming in the sun, the smell hits you before your brain can fully process it. Sharp, sour, strangely chemical. like vinegar and something that should never have been warmed up. You take a step back. In Rome, urine was prized for its ammonia content. It was collected in jars, public urinals, even buckets hung outside people's homes, all brought here to be used in washing clothes. Or more accurately, bleaching and scouring them. Picture it. Enslaved workers standing barefoot in vats of warm water and urine, stomping your tunic like grapes in a winery. That crisp white toga of the upper class. Yeah, that glow comes from pee stomping. You suddenly don't feel so classy anymore. The Emperor Vespasian even taxed urine collection. Not joking. He imposed a urine tax on public toilets and laundries. When someone mocked him for profiting off such filth, he held out a coin and said, "Money doesn't stink." Classic Roman dad joke. Scholars still debate whether the phrase pecunia non olet, money doesn't smell, originated here or was just too perfect to pass up. Either way, your nose disagrees. You pass by a laundress wringing out a tunic. The water drips onto the stone street and instantly releases a smell that curls your toes. You pick up your pace. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. Someone nearby opens a jar of garum, a fermented fish sauce beloved by Romans and possibly invented as a dare. You don't see the jar, but you feel it. Like a slap in the face with a fish that's been dead for a week. The laundry worker takes a deep breath, completely unfazed. You realize. This is normal. This is their everyday. To them, you're the weird one for gagging. You, with your delicate nose and your need for boundaries. Back in the center of town, you spot one of the public urinals, known as foracae. It's just a stone basin recessed into a wall, wide enough for someone to, shall we say, contribute to the communal bucket. It's out in the open. People just walk up, do their thing, and move on. And you know what? Everyone's fine with it. You try not to look directly. Eye contact during urination is frowned upon in all centuries. These urinals helped feed the laundry industry, and were emptied regularly by collectors who probably deserved hazard pay but absolutely didn't get it. The system worked, in a bizarre Roman way. Collect, stomp, rinse, hopefully, and repeat. But let's be clear, the city did not smell better because of it. In fact, laundry districts were known for their overwhelming stench. They weren't tucked away. They were often in crowded neighborhoods, near markets, near homes. So instead of the fresh scent of soap and lavender, imagine trying to enjoy a street performance next to the overpowering aroma of hot ammonia. And guess what? You're still not done with pee. Because the Romans didn't just use it for laundry. Oh no, they used it to whiten teeth. Yes, dear listener. You pass a small cosmetics stall where a woman offers you a tooth whitening powder. You ask what's in it, instantly regretting the question. She smiles. Spoiler, it's urine. Aged, filtered, and mixed with powdered pumice for that exfoliating touch. You back away slowly, trying not to barf. You pass another Fullonica, this one bigger. Inside, a team of workers, some free, most enslaved, stomp tunics while someone stirs a vat with a wooden pole. You wonder how anyone could do this day after day without losing their sense of smell, and maybe their will to live. And yet, this was life. Clean clothes were a status symbol. Whiter meant better. And if you had to wash them in human pee, well, that's just how it worked. You pause at a corner and glance down at your own tunic. It's already soaked with sweat, dust, and who knows what else. You wonder what it would cost to get it cleaned here. Then you remember the process and decide, maybe it's fine dirty. You walk on, nose half dead, brain spinning. Somehow, this city, the jewel of the ancient world, is held together by piss and pride. A million people, all pretending not to notice they're standing ankle deep in shared bodily fluids. But you notice. You always will. The next time you smell something bad in the real world, a dirty bathroom, a trash bin, a forgotten fridge item, just think, at least you're not living in a city where laundry smells like it came from a urinal. The wind shifts again, carrying a fresh wave of eye-watering ammonia. You nearly trip over a chicken. Welcome to Rome. You've walked past the gutters, ducked from the urine splash zones, and nearly passed out at the laundry vat. But now, you follow the scent of something oddly steamy. A different kind of funk. Less sharp, more sour. The kind that clings to damp towels and regret. Congratulations, you've arrived at the Roman public baths. And yes, they stink too. You enter cautiously. The doorway opens into a wide atrium, light filtering in through high, open windows. Columns line the space, and for a moment, you feel like you're stepping into something sacred. That illusion vanishes the moment someone walks past you, wrapped in a damp linen, burping audibly from too much wine. The floor squelches slightly under your feet. It shouldn't squelch. These are the thermi, the pride of Roman hygiene, leisure, and social status. Everyone comes here. Senators, merchants, soldiers, even slaves. It's where deals are made, gossip flows like olive oil, and pores get mildly cleaned. You expected steam. You didn't expect the smell. It's a layered thing. Like old gym socks, wet stone, body odor, olive oil, mildew, and something faintly eggy, like someone bathed with hard-boiled sulfur. It's humid, heavy, and constant. The baths are communal, and so is the stench. You follow the flow of bodies through a sequence of rooms: a potitarium, changing room, tepidarium, warm room, caldarium, hot room, and frigidarium, cold plunge. Each has its own personality. In the changing room, piles of clothes sit on stone benches, soaked with sweat and bathhouse floor juice. No lockers. Just hope your stuff's still there when you're done. The tepidarium is warm and echoey. Water drips constantly from the ceiling. Men recline against the walls, half asleep. Their sandals squish with every step. Someone scratches his back with a stick. You try not to stare. You try not to breathe too deeply. You reach the caldarium, the hottest room, and it hits you like a wall. The humidity slaps your face. The stone walls sweat. So do you. The water here is hot, stagnant, and infused with the skin cells of possibly hundreds of people per day. Fun fact: Romans used olive oil instead of soap. They'd slather it on, then scrape it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. Sounds classy, right? Except no one had their own oil. Communal jars were used. That's right. You're rubbing the same goop into your pores as the guy who just sneezed into it. Delicious. Scholars still argue whether the oil actually cleansed the body or just redistributed the grime in a more socially acceptable way. You sit cautiously on a stone bench, already slick with something. Across from you, a man is getting scraped down by an attendant. The floor is littered with little piles of oily gunk. You're 97% sure one of them just moved. You look away. Too late. A bucket of water is dumped into the air, briefly sending steam everywhere. A woman nearby adds some herbs, maybe to mask the scent. It doesn't work. Every surface in here is breeding bacteria with the enthusiasm of a Roman festival. And yet, people seem relaxed. Cheerful, even. This is their time to unwind, to socialize. It's not about cleanliness, it's about ritual. Repetition. Community. You head to the frigidarium, hoping for some relief. The cold plunge. Maybe the smell's better here. It is not. The water is cold, yes, but also cloudy. A murky green-blue shade that makes you think of swamps and questionable decisions. Someone just dove in with a loud splash, sending waves lapping up onto the edge. You watch the ripple carry a small chunk of, you know what? You don't want to know. You decide against swimming. A bathhouse worker mops near the edge of the pool with a rag that's mostly holes. He doesn't look happy. You suspect no one in his line of work smells normal ever again. One more detail: the baths didn't have any sort of chlorination. Obviously. No filtration. No drainage between shifts. Just hot water, sweaty people, scraped off oil, foot skin, and the occasional bodily fluid, all stirred up in a glorious Roman soup. You backtrack into the atrium to breathe. Sort of. The air outside smells marginally better. A mixture of hot stone, smoke, and stale bread. Outside the baths, there's a small latrine, a communal toilet. Stone benches with holes. No privacy. No partitions. People sit side by side and chat while they go. It's like a bathroom break and a podcast recording all in one. And to wipe. Oh, you'll love this. A communal sponge on a stick, stored in a bucket of vinegar water. Shared, reused, dipped, repeated. There's no hand soap. You lean on a column and try not to cry. Back in the baths, someone lets out a loud laugh. You hear a splash. Someone's arguing about taxes. A boy runs past you, soaked and barefoot. Life continues. You realize something strange. In this chaotic, bacteria-laced, communal body stew, there's an odd sense of peace. No one's rushing. No one's pretending they're above the mess. They've accepted the grossness as part of the package. You, however, are still holding your breath. As you walk away from the bathhouse, the heat outside actually feels refreshing. Dry. Cleaner. Somehow. You never thought you'd say this, but you miss the smell of the streets. At least that wasn't humid. And now that your nose has been sufficiently assaulted by every kind of bodily emission, it's time to talk about toilets. Because if you thought public bathing was bad, wait till you see where Romans went. Number 2. You probably think you've hit rock bottom already. Between the steaming urine vats, the oily human soup of the bathhouse, and that cursed sponge on a stick, surely things can't get worse. Oh, friend. They can always get worse. Because now we talk about toilets. You spot a building tucked between two shops, unmarked, worn, and strangely quiet. That's your first clue that something unspeakable happens in there. You peek inside. Stone benches line the walls. Not padded seats. Not private stalls. Just stone slabs, waist high, with smooth holes carved evenly across the top. Side by side, zero privacy, zero dividers, 100% eye contact potential. You take a cautious step inside. The air is difficult. A mix of old waste, wet stone, and vinegar. The smell is so deeply embedded in the room, it feels less like something you inhale and more like something that crawls up your nostrils and sets up camp. Welcome to the latrina, the public restroom of ancient Rome. Now imagine this. You enter to relieve yourself, and there are already 6 people sitting side by side, chatting about politics, the latest gladiator games, maybe complaining about taxes. You sit. You join the conversation. You do your business while maintaining eye contact with a man named Gaius, who sells olives. This was normal. Romans viewed bathroom time as social time. No embarrassment. No shame. Just a bunch of people squatting over holes in the stone and gossiping about their neighbor's suspiciously pale goat. And before you ask, yes, urine and feces went into a shared channel beneath the seats, often washed away by trickling water from nearby baths or fountains. But the system wasn't always flowing, and sometimes, things got stuck. That smell. It's not going anywhere. And now the detail that makes most modern people emotionally shut down. The tersorium, a communal sponge on a stick, soaked in vinegar water, used for wiping. Shared. Stored in a bucket. Passed along from one user to the next like some cursed relay baton. You look at the bucket. You look at the sponge. You quietly make a vow to never eat again. Scholars still debate whether each user had their own personal sponge, highly unlikely, or if the vinegar was somehow enough to sanitize it between uses, optimistic at best. But based on what your nose is telling you, that vinegar's not doing its job. You perch awkwardly near the entrance, trying not to touch anything. A man walks in, greets you like an old friend, sits down, and starts humming. You pretend to tie your sandal until he's done. Now, here's where it gets worse. The latrines weren't just disgusting. They were dangerous. Ever heard of toilet demons? No joke. Romans believed that evil spirits lived in the sewers. Why? Because sometimes, when someone was doing their business, a burst of flame would erupt from the hole. Like actual fire. From beneath. You'd be minding your business, and suddenly whoosh, the toilet belches fire into your undercarriage. Modern scholars blame this on methane gas buildup from decomposing waste. When ignited by a torch, or a spark, it would flare up dramatically. Ancient Romans. They just blamed it on demons. Logical. Some people even reported rats climbing up from the sewer system and biting them mid-process. So not only did you have to worry about burning, but also surprise rodent attacks. A full sensory nightmare. You glance around the latrine. There's no ventilation, no windows, just damp air, stone walls, and a dozen too many smells. You're sweating. Your skin is crawling. You realize you've been holding your breath for about 2 minutes. You back out slowly. Outside, the sun hits your face like a divine gift. You take your first cleanish breath in what feels like a year, even if it's tinged with donkey sweat and fish guts. Still better than what's inside. Across the street, someone's selling spiced nuts. You flinch. No food can ever be eaten again after what you've just experienced. The thing is, public latrines weren't a luxury. They were necessary. The average Roman household didn't have a private toilet, especially in the cramped insulae, the apartment buildings where most of the urban population lived. Those buildings were often 5 stories tall, made of wood, prone to collapse, and absolutely lacking in plumbing. So what did people do at night when nature called? They used chamber pots. And then, they emptied them out the window. Into the street. Below. On your head. Maybe even on your dinner guest's head. You remember that splash from earlier. You shudder. There were even laws against dumping waste from windows, but, like many Roman laws, enforcement was theoretical. The poor souls walking the streets below simply accepted their fate. Umbrellas. Not invented yet. Shame. Optional. You start walking again, faster this time. The ground is streaked with old splashes, bits of trash, and things you refuse to identify. You step over a suspicious puddle, nearly slipping. You're not sure which is worse, knowing what's under your feet or realizing that everyone's just okay with it. That's the most jarring part of it all. This isn't some rare, awful day in Rome. This is Tuesday. Maybe even a good Tuesday. People are shopping, laughing, debating philosophy, all while surrounded by enough biological warfare to shut down a modern city. You duck into an alley to collect yourself. A cat watches you from a windowsill, its expression one of mild judgment. You breathe. Slowly. You remind yourself that this is the greatest city of the ancient world, a beacon of culture, art, law, and excrement, and the sponge. Yeah, that's going to haunt your dreams. You step back into the street and try to shake it off. There's still so much left to see. The markets, the temples, the feasts. But something tells you the worst smells are still ahead. And they're going to be meaty. You've done your time in the latrines. You've smelled things no human should ever smell. You've locked eyes with a communal sponge. So what's next? Well, if you were hoping for relief, you're out of luck, because now we're going food shopping. Yes, it's time to enter the Roman marketplace, where hunger meets horror and the scent of raw ambition is only slightly overpowered by rotting meat, you wander into a bustling open square. This is the Forum Boreum, Rome's main cattle market. Think of it like your local butcher, but if your butcher also smelled like warm death and was surrounded by loose chickens and ankle-deep sludge, the first thing that hits you is the flies. So many flies. They're everywhere, swarming in tight clouds around meat stalls, dipping in and out of fish guts, buzzing around baskets of slightly too warm fruit. One lands on your cheek. You don't even flinch. At this point, your skin is emotionally detached. You pass a stall with hanging slabs of goat, their surfaces glistening in the sun. The butcher swats at the flies absent-mindedly with a bundle of rosemary, partly to ward off pests, partly to give the illusion that herbs are going to fix any of this. A man next to you holds up a liver and sniffs it. He shrugs and tosses it back onto the pile. You slowly back away. Now here's the thing, Romans didn't have refrigeration. Nothing was kept cold. Meat was butchered fresh, and if it didn't sell by the end of the day, it was sold the next day anyway, just with extra character. Maybe a splash of vinegar. Maybe a scrape of mold. Maybe it's fine. Spoiler. It's not fine. You watch a vendor slice into a piece of pork, and a small puff of something greenish escapes from the cut. The man sniffs it, shrugs, and rubs it with salt. That's the fix-all here. Salt everything, and hope no one dies. Fun fact: Romans loved eating everything. Tongue, intestines, lungs, feet, blood pudding. Nothing was off limits. If it once made a sound, it probably ended up on a Roman dinner plate, ideally after fermenting a little bit. You stop at a fishmonger's stall. A wooden table holds what used to be mackerel. Their eyes are cloudy. Their bodies bend wrong. You pretend not to notice the maggots. And then, right next to them, garum. The infamous, glorious, fermented fish sauce. You've already smelled hints of it in the air, but here, you meet it face to jar. You see a row of clay amphorae, corked at the top. Dark liquid sloshing inside. A vendor proudly uncorks one for a customer, and the smell hits you like an uppercut to the soul. Garum is made by layering fish guts, salt, and herbs in the sun, for weeks. It's left to rot, liquefy, and ferment into a brown sludge, which is then strained and sold as the most popular condiment in Rome. Think of it as ancient ketchup, if ketchup was brewed inside a haunted boot. The customer takes a sip straight from the jar. You watch his eye twitch. He gives a thumbs up. You nearly pass out. Scholars still argue whether garum tasted better fresh or aged longer. What they don't argue about is how horrifying the smell is. One ancient writer even warned against making it too close to your home unless you wanted your neighbors to move away or die. And here it is, sloshing down the sides of the vendor's table, mixing with old fish water, rat tracks, and discarded bones. You make a small noise in the back of your throat. The vendor hears it and offers you a taste. You run. You dart past a table selling cheese. Some of it looks normal, soft, creamy, slightly yellowed. Other parts look like someone left a wet sponge in the sun for a year and sprinkled it with hair. Is that moving? You keep running. Now the fruit stands. You think, finally, a break, a bit of sweetness, something safe. You poor, naive soul. You lean over a basket of figs and instantly smell wine, honey, and decay. Half the fruit is splitting open from the heat, bees crawling across the sugar-glazed pulp. A boy nearby pops one into his mouth and smiles. His teeth are purple. At another stall, a woman sells olives from a barrel. They glisten in oil and something else. One drops to the ground, and she picks it up, brushes it once on her tunic, and pops it back in the barrel. You move on. Somewhere nearby, a man is roasting meat on a spit. You approach cautiously, thinking maybe Just maybe, the fire will have killed the worst of the bacteria. It smells smoky. Charred. Not bad, actually. You're about to say something encouraging, and then he slathers it in garum. You stagger backward into a cart selling pickled dormice. Yes. Dormice. Small rodents, skinned, stuffed with herbs and nuts, and pickled or baked. A delicacy. You lock eyes with one. Its little face is still intact. You whisper an apology and leave. You find a shaded wall and lean against it, trying not to retch. The sounds of the market continue. Coins clinking, vendors shouting, a child crying, someone vomiting. Relatable. You close your eyes and try to imagine fresh air. Green fields. Running water. A sandwich that hasn't been aged in the sun. Instead, you smell garum. Again. It's in your hair now. It's on your clothes. It's in your soul. And still, this is where the Romans came to feast. The upper class had private dinners, yes, but they still bought their ingredients here. This was the heart of Rome's culinary world. Rotten meat, fermented fish sauce, sour wine, pickled mice, and somehow, people made it work. You open your eyes. A man walks past you, holding a dripping slab of something red and raw, swinging it like a briefcase. He smiles. You cry a little. And somewhere, deep down, you realize, this is only lunch. You still have to survive dinner. You thought the market was the climax of Rome's olfactory assault. Think again. Because now you're invited to a Roman feast. The infamous convivium. Imagine a sprawling room filled with reclining guests, eating off shared plates, drinking wine that's probably watered down, or maybe not. The smell here. A heady cocktail of roasted meats, incense, sweat, and the faint trace of vomit. Yes, vomiting was actually part of some feasts, but more on that later. You slide into your spot on a low couch, joining the conversation as servants bring platter after platter of food. Each dish is more elaborate, and questionable, than the last. There's stuffed dormice, you saw those in the market, remember? Boiled ostrich eggs, and even jelly made from boiled pig's feet. Between bites, guests lean back and regale each other with stories, poetry, or the latest scandal. You try to enjoy the atmosphere, but your nose has other plans. The star of the show, of course, is the wine. Romans didn't drink it pure, too strong. Instead, they mixed it with water, honey, and sometimes herbs. But it was rarely chilled or filtered, and often, fermented a little too long. The result? A pungent, sour, slightly vinegary punch that would make modern sommelier faint. You take a cautious sip, your face contorting as you realize this is probably what happened to the fish sauce when it tried to become wine. Between sips, someone offers you more garum, as a dip. You decline politely, but the host insists, saying it brings out the flavor. You try to smile, but it comes off as a grimace. Meanwhile, the floor is a mess. Oil drips, scraps fall, and if you're unlucky, someone might just upchuck right next to you. The Romans were known for indulging their appetites so fiercely that vomiting mid-feast wasn't uncommon. The famous vomitorium. Not a room to purge, but the passageways to leave quickly, though some myths insist otherwise. Your stomach flips, and you're seriously considering slipping out early. But before you can, the entertainment begins. A troupe of dancers and musicians floods the room, and the guests' attention turns to them, along with their noses. The music is lively, but the mingling scents of sweat, wine, and roasted game create a sensory overload. You close your eyes, imagining a breeze, anything to clear the air. As the evening drags on, the wine flows more freely, conversations get louder, and the smells grow thicker. You find yourself yearning for a simple walk in the countryside, or even a quick dip in the less stinky but still questionable bathhouse. Despite all this, there's a camaraderie here, a shared acceptance of the unpleasantness as part of life's texture. You might not survive a day in Rome without a strong stomach and a nose of steel, but the people, they thrived in it. And hey, at least they didn't have to worry about modern-day traffic jams. You finally slip out, grateful for the cool night air, and the absence of garum. You step out from the banquet like a survivor stumbling from a battlefield. Your tunic clings to you, part sweat, part spilled wine, and probably a little fish sauce. The moon hangs low over Rome, casting long shadows across the uneven cobblestones. The air is cooler now, but don't let that fool you. It still stinks. The feast is over, but the night is alive. The streets are humming with noise. Rome doesn't sleep early. Street performers drum on upturned amphorae. Lovers argue under balconies. Drunk citizens stagger past you in search of a latrine they will absolutely not find in time. And then, the wind shifts. You smell smoke. Not the comforting kind. Not hearth smoke or incense. This is acrid, sharp, with the unmistakable tang of burning trash and something else. Something you wish you couldn't identify. You follow it, because of course you do. You turn a corner into a narrow alleyway, and there it is. A bonfire, built not for warmth or celebration, but for waste. You've found a Roman refuse heap, where unwanted food, rotting cloth, and sometimes even dead animals are burned in open pits or piles. In a city of over 1 million people and no sanitation department, garbage disposal is DIY. The flames crackle, casting an orange glow on broken amphorae and half-eaten loaves. A skinned goat head sits at the edge of the fire, one eye still intact. You don't look directly at it. A rat darts past your foot. You jump. No one around you even blinks. Here's the thing. Romans produced a lot of trash. Bones, shells, ashes, broken pottery, spoiled grain, used sandals, it all had to go somewhere. There was no central collection. So people just tossed their waste out windows, into alleys, or down into the Tiber. The rest was burned. You cough as the smoke rises, mingling with the scent of sewage from a nearby gutter. Someone throws a sack into the fire. It bursts with a sizzle. You step back quickly. And then you hear it, a distant, echoing voice. It's a night watchman, making his rounds. Not for safety. Oh no. He's not here to protect citizens. He's here to make sure no one starts another fire that spreads too far. Fires were a constant threat in Rome. Buildings were made of wood and packed tightly together. One careless spark, and half a neighborhood could go up in flames. It happened. A lot. The Great Fire of Rome, in 64 CE, destroyed much of the city. Scholars still argue whether Nero really fiddled as it burned, or whether that's just a juicy myth. Either way, fire was terrifyingly common. You turn another corner, and now the smell changes again, to something sour and damp, like mushrooms growing in a forgotten boot. It's the smell of decay, of things left to rot. This alley is filled with piles of organic waste, vegetable skins, wilted herbs, matted straw, and more unidentifiable goo. You pass by a mound that squelches under your sandal. You keep walking. You never look back. People still live here. Above you, apartments stacked 5 stories high teeter toward the street. Wooden balconies sag under their own weight. From an open window, someone tosses a bone that nearly hits your head. Mind yourself, a voice calls. No apology. Just advice. You press on, your path lit only by the occasional oil lamp. And even those are sputtering. The fuel often mixed with animal fat, so they smell like someone tried to light a candle made of beef. You pass a tannery. That's where animal hides are processed for leather. The smell is unforgettable. Urine, again, lime, dung, and rotting flesh. Workers drag half-skinned carcasses across the stone floor, tossing them into pits to soak. The air is so thick you can almost chew it. You cough. Your eyes water. You question your life choices. And then, off in the distance, the Tiber River. Ah, fresh water. A break. A reprieve. You rush toward it, following the breeze. And then it hits you. The Tiber stinks. Worse than you could have imagined. It's not just water. It's a soup of everything Rome doesn't want to deal with. Sewage, animal remains, garbage, industrial runoff, broken dreams. People use it to bathe, wash clothes, dump waste, and, tragically, drink. It's brown, sluggish, and oily. You spot a bloated something floating near the bank. You do not investigate. You lean on a wall, trying not to breathe. A man nearby scoops a bucketful of water and splashes it onto his face. You gag. This river, Rome's lifeline, is also its latrine. And yet, this was normal. This was life. People built temples near it, held ceremonies, sacrifices, political protests, all while the water below slowly curdled. You turn away. There's no escape. No corner of the city untouched by decay, rot, or the sweet perfume of public bodily fluids. But somehow, people endure. They eat. They laugh. They fall in love. They even write poetry. You wipe your face, which now carries a fine misting of river spray and regret. Somewhere nearby, someone sneezes. The sound echoes down the alley, and you suddenly feel very, very tired. The city hums on. The fire still burns in the trash pile behind you. The river still stinks. And tomorrow, it'll all start again. You were warned you wouldn't survive a day in ancient Rome. Now you know. Why? And just when you think you've smelled everything this place has to offer, a cart rolls past with a load of fresh human waste, collected from chamber pots for use as fertilizer. Of course it does. It's deep into the Roman night now, the kind of hour when even the city's chaos takes a short nap. You wander the quieter streets, where the crowds thin and the torchlight flickers lower. For the first time today, there's almost a hush. You can hear your own footsteps echo on the stone. For a moment, you start to think the worst is behind you. But then, the breeze changes. Of course it does. And you're hit with something new. Tanning oil and rotting fabric. You're near the Fullonica, Rome's version of a dry cleaner, except nothing is dry and everything smells like a chemical accident crossed with foot sweat. You step closer, drawn by the low splash of water and the sight of workers stomping on laundry in giant stone vats. It almost looks fun, until you remember what's actually in those vats. Urine. Yep. Human urine. Used as a detergent. See, Romans discovered that the ammonia in urine was great for loosening dirt and stains from togas, tunics, and sheets. So they collected it, from public urinals, chamber pots, even street jars, and poured it into massive basins where workers, barefoot and miserable, would stomp the clothes clean. Fun historical fact, Emperor Vespasian actually placed a tax on urine collection. That's how common it was. Scholars still debate whether that money was reinvested into the economy or just used to buy less terrible-smelling sandals. You watch a young boy dunk a pair of socks into a vat and mash them with his heels. A cloud of sour, ammoniac steam rises. You involuntarily flinch. Another worker walks by carrying a stack of clean linen that smells like a public restroom in August. And yet, people paid for this service. The freshly laundered clothing would then be pressed, scented with herbs, and sent home looking pristine, and only slightly urine-scented if you knew what you were sniffing for. Rich folks wouldn't be caught dead cleaning their own clothes. Why would they, when someone else could soak their tunic in a pea stew for them? You back away slowly from the Fullonica, but the stench lingers. It's in your hair now. In your sinuses. On your soul. You suspect you'll smell it in your dreams. You already regret every toga you admired in a museum. Still coughing, you make your way downhill. Rome is nothing if not a city of slopes. And at the bottom, Nestled near the edge of a crumbling brick wall, is a tannery. You stop. Because apparently, you haven't suffered enough. Earlier, you passed one in the dark. Now you're face to face with it. Imagine the worst locker room you've ever entered. Multiply that by fire, then add the scent of raw death and expired leather. That's the Roman tannery. Here, they process animal skins, soaking them in urine, lime, and dung to loosen the hair, then scraping them with dull knives, stretching them, and finally drying them out in the open air. The result? Leather. And the bonus? Neighborhoods that smelled like eternal damnation. You watch a man use his bare hands to work a hide across a frame. His arms are slick with fluids that don't bear description. A woman nearby hangs a finished pelt on a line strung between two posts. The wind shifts and the air turns from mildly unfortunate to smells like a wolf exploded. You turn away. To distract yourself, you duck into what looks like a workshop. It's cooler inside, and quieter, filled with looms and thread and bolts of dyed fabric. You breathe in. Instant regret. Because Roman dyes weren't exactly made with lavender and sunshine. Especially purple, the color of royalty. That dye, derived from crushed sea snails, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of them, left to rot and ferment before being boiled into a rich, reddish-purple liquid. You find a vat. You wish you hadn't. It smells like seafood that tried to escape the afterlife but got stuck halfway. You watch a worker dip a tunic into the dye. He pulls it out, and it glows with royal color, and also, you're fairly sure, some kind of dark sorcery. The scent sticks to your tongue like regret. Again, this was a luxury. The more it reeked, the more valuable the result. If your cloak didn't stink, were you even elite? You step outside again, only to be immediately greeted by yet another charming Roman reality: human sweat. Not just a little. This is city-wide, fermented, open-air beau. Remember, Romans bathed regularly, but that was hours ago. The day's heat, the endless walking, and the fact that deodorant was mostly flour paste and hope means that by evening, the streets reek of pits. And it's everywhere. You pass by men in armor, women in layered wool, and children who probably haven't bathed since Saturnalia. You try holding your breath. You almost faint. A man offers you a fig. You politely decline. You try to think about anything else. Something nice. A breeze. Birds. Then you realize, where are all the birds? That's when you remember. Romans ate them. Sparrows, pigeons, songbirds. All snacks. Roasted whole or stuffed. If it flew, it probably ended up on a skewer. The city hums with human life, but it's eerily low on birdsong. You wonder if they all left or if they just got baked into a pie. You stop in the middle of the street. Look around. Everything smells. Everything is something. There's no neutrality. Even the bricks radiate heat that smells like dog breath and old soup. You've been here less than 24 hours. Your clothes are ruined. Your nose has aged 10 years. You're not even sure who you are anymore. And yet, there's something intoxicating about it all. Not the smells, obviously, those are a war crime. But the energy, the audacity, the fact that people not only lived in this, but built empires in it. You take one final breath. Deep, brave, stupid. It smells like history. Also probably poop. But mostly history. You thought the night was your ally. You thought, surely, after the Fullonica and the tanneries, the worst must be behind me. Oh no, because now you're heading into one of the most deceptively charming, and secretly putrid, parts of ancient Rome, the insulae, the apartment blocks. The slums. The places where most Romans actually lived. From a distance, these tall, crowded buildings look almost cozy. Narrow staircases. Wooden balconies. Laundry fluttering in the breeze. But up close, it's a different story. A very different smell. You step into a narrow alley between two insulae. It's barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing shoulders, and yet it's the main entryway for hundreds of residents. The walls lean inward slightly, as if conspiring to trap the air in here forever. And that air, let's just say, if you bottled it, you'd have a biohazard on your hands. The scent is a blend of urine, smoke, spoiled bread, body odor, cheap wine, and something you can only describe as emotional damage. You start climbing one of the staircases, wooden, rickety, and groaning under your weight. Every step sends a puff of stale dust into your face, along with the unmistakable stench of mildew. It's damp up here, and poorly ventilated. Because here's the fun part. The higher up you live, the worse it gets. Rich folks. They live on the ground floor, close to the water supply, away from the sun, easy access to the streets. Poorer folks. They're stuffed into upper stories, climbing 5 or 6 flights daily just to reach a bed that probably smells like smoke and sadness. And the bathrooms. There are no bathrooms. At least, not inside. Residents use shared chamber pots, which they empty, or don't, down the side of the building. Yes, people just dumped human waste out their windows. You freeze mid-step when you see a bucket tip over above you. Something wet splatters on the stone nearby. You look up. A boy grins and waves. You do not wave back. You reach the top floor, panting. Up here, the air is thick and warm. Not hot like a sunny day, more like the inside of a tired sock. The walls are cracked. The ceilings are low. And the smell is alive. Inside one room, a family of 5 shares a single space. A pot of stew simmers on a charcoal brazier. It smells vaguely edible, vaguely suspicious. You're pretty sure something's fermenting in the corner, but no one seems alarmed. The floorboards creak. The windows don't open. There's no chimney. The smoke just lingers. You cough and step back out into the stairwell, which now smells like you never left the tannery. You pass another door. Inside, someone's singing, off-key and drunk. You smile. Then the breeze shifts, and you catch a fresh wave of spoiled goat cheese and feet. You make your way down. Carefully. Midway, you spot a public latrine tucked into the alley. A miracle, you think, until you remember how public latrines work here. Communal benches. No partitions. Just rows of holes cut into stone, with flowing water underneath to carry waste away, in theory. In reality, the smell is strong enough to knock over a donkey. There's a sponge on a stick, of course, the Roman equivalent of toilet paper. It's shared. Rinsed occasionally. Probably cursed. You do not enter the latrine. Back outside, you lean against a wall and try to breathe through your mouth. Doesn't help. You taste the city now. You are part of it. Congratulations. Nearby, a cart rolls past carrying used straw bedding to be burned or reused. It smells exactly like you'd expect. Sweat, mildew, and years of regret compressed into one lumpy mattress. A woman dumps grayish water into the gutter. A child throws a chicken bone into the street. A dog trots by and eats it. Everything here recycles, just not in a way modern health departments would appreciate. You pass a bakery. A flicker of hope. Fresh bread. Could it be? You inhale. Yes. Warm, yeasty, slightly burnt, an actual pleasant smell. But then, of course, the back door opens and you catch the scent of old flour, dead yeast, and rodent droppings. You remind yourself that rats outnumber people here, and they love bakeries. Historical tidbit. Many bakers added powdered stone or chalk to their flour to stretch it. Not great for the stomach, but excellent for wearing down your teeth. Archaeologists have found Roman skeletons with teeth ground almost flat. So even when it smells nice, Rome still finds a way to betray you. You keep walking. The streets narrow further. You're in the real back alleys now, the ones that don't show up on the frescoes. Here, you find animal pens tucked behind buildings, goats, pigs, sometimes even cows, all living right next to the people. And guess what? They don't have bathrooms either. The entire street smells like a barnyard crash-landed in a laundromat. You hear oinking. You smell hay mixed with droppings mixed with wet fur. A pig looks at you like you smell bad. Rude, but fair. You turn a corner and, surprise, another bonfire. This one is smaller, surrounded by neighbors warming their hands and burning random refuse. One man throws in an old shoe. Another tosses a fish head. The smoke rises thick and greasy. Scholars still argue about how effective Roman fire brigades actually were. Some say they only responded if paid up front. Others argue they were reasonably efficient. Either way, you're not calling anyone. You're too busy trying not to pass out. You finally reach the outskirts of the neighborhood. You sit on a stone bench, your nose desensitized, your mind slightly fried. You've walked through homes, shops, factories, and alleys, and not once did you find a place that didn't smell like something. Rome doesn't do neutral. It does extremes. And you, poor time-traveling soul, have now smelled every layer of its pungent history. You lean back, close your eyes, and smile. It's not pleasant. But it's real. You're not sure how long you sit on that stone bench. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. Time gets weird when you're constantly holding your breath and questioning your life choices. But eventually, you stand. Because you remember there's still one place left to explore. The Forum. Ah, the beating heart of Rome. Political speeches, legal debates, business deals, public punishments, all wrapped up in a plaza that supposedly symbolizes the height of civilization. You head there now, weaving through streets that no longer shock your senses. You've grown stronger. Or maybe just permanently damaged. As you reach the Forum, the city opens up. It's more spacious here. Breezier. Cleaner. You allow yourself a cautious inhale. Huh. Not bad. Stone. Dust. A faint whiff of incense. And, wait, is that flowers? For a brief, beautiful moment, you're convinced you've found the one non-disgusting place in Rome. But you're forgetting something important. People still exist here. And people, as we've established, bring smells. The Forum might be the hub of Roman life, but that just means more feet, more breath, more stress sweat, and more food carts with questionable fish. It's just the same chaos in a fancier package. You pass a temple, where priests light incense to please the gods, or maybe to cover up the smell of animal sacrifice. You see a streak of dried blood on the altar and a man sweeping entrails into a basket. So much for holy ambiance. Nearby, a senator in a white toga raises his arms dramatically, delivering a speech. You'd admire the oratory if you weren't so distracted by the smell of goat cheese melting in the sun from a nearby vendor cart. People gather around a table where a man is selling what he claims is imported Egyptian perfume. You lean closer. It smells like olive oil and desperation. You move on. You pass a statue, or what's left of one. Its base is surrounded by bird droppings, though no actual birds are in sight. Curious. Then you remember. Many of Rome's pigeons end up skewered at taverns. And even if the birds are gone, the smell. Permanent. Someone's shouting about a trial, a theft case, maybe. You stop to listen, but your attention quickly shifts to the stench of nearby sewage bubbling up through the drains. Because yes, the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, runs right under this place. A marvel of engineering, sure. But not one you want to be standing over when the wind shifts. You walk faster. At the far end of the Forum, a small crowd is gathered around what looks like a punishment platform. A thief is being publicly humiliated, or possibly whipped. You try to focus on the moral lesson. but the stench of blood and sweat and fear is too thick. You move away again. And then you see it. A man relieving himself behind a column. No shame. Just business. You lock eyes briefly. He nods. You nod back. It's a weird moment of mutual understanding. This is Rome. Privacy is a myth. So is fresh air. Desperate for relief, you spot a public fountain and lean down to splash your face. Bad idea. Someone clearly used it to rinse out laundry or possibly a small animal. The water smells faintly metallic and sour. You regret everything again. You continue walking, finally reaching the edge of the forum, where a group of philosophers is arguing about Stoicism. The irony is not lost on you, because you've spent the last 12 hours trying to emotionally detach from your own nose. One of the philosophers adjusts his robe and steps closer. He smells like wine-soaked parchment and unshaved philosophy. His breath is intense enough to start a debate on its own. You nod politely and leave before you're dragged into a discussion about the nature of suffering. You already know the answer. It smells like this city. Just past the forum lies a small garden, more decorative than practical, but it's the closest thing to nature you've seen all day. You step inside, and you know what? It's almost okay. There are flowers here. Real ones. Lavender. Rosemary. Some poppies. You take a deep, cautious sniff. You blink. No gagging. No coughing. No regret. You almost cry. You sit for a moment, letting your lungs recalibrate, surrounded by bees and blossoms. A woman nearby is cutting herbs. She hums softly. You close your eyes. Then someone lights a fire to cook snails and the smell of burning butter and mollusk invades your peace. Of course. It was too good to last. You stand up and begin walking again, weaving back through the forum's arches and columns, past monuments built to celebrate conquest, bloodshed, and the sheer audacity of empire. And through it all, you notice something strange. The Romans don't mind. They don't flinch at the smell. Don't gag at the drains. Don't panic when someone tosses a pot of urine out a window. This is normal. This is life. In fact, if you asked a Roman what their city smells like, they'd probably blink and say, "What smell?" Because for them, this was just Rome being Rome. As you walk deeper into the heart of Rome, you feel it, the weight of history, the unshakable presence of those who've lived, loved, fought, and died in this very place. The city is a patchwork of old and new. The ancient buildings stand shoulder to shoulder with modern structures, the walls whispering secrets, the stones bearing witness to centuries of change. You wander down to Via Appia, the ancient Roman road that stretches all the way to the south of Italy. The road that once carried armies, politicians, merchants, and slaves. Now, it's quieter. The hustle and bustle of the city has moved on, but the smell of history still lingers. You're walking on stone that has worn down by the footsteps of a million souls. Every crack in the pavement tells a story. Each ancient slab of rock is part of a larger tapestry, a tapestry that's alive, breathing, and constantly evolving. You reach a section of the road where a cluster of mausoleums stands. These grand tombs are the final resting places of the elite, the powerful. You stand before one, a towering structure made of weathered marble. It's not the grandest tomb in the city, but it has a certain presence. The air here is different. It's cooler, the scents are softer, the sounds more distant. You feel like you've stepped out of the chaos of Roman life and into the quiet of eternity. But even in the stillness, the smell of death hangs in the air, a faint, musty odor that seems to come from the stones themselves. In ancient Rome, death was a constant companion. It was never far from the minds of the people. They lived with the knowledge that life was fleeting, that their time on earth was limited. And so they built their tombs with a sense of permanence. The grandest tombs were not just for the dead, but for the living, a way to leave a mark, to ensure they would be remembered long after their bodies had decayed. You can almost imagine the processions that passed by this very spot. The mourners, the priests, the family members, all carrying the heavy weight of loss on their shoulders. But even in mourning, the Roman people did not shy away from spectacle. Death was something to be honored, celebrated even. In fact, the funerary processions often included games, theatrical performances, and even gladiatorial fights. Death wasn't just an end, it was part of the great Roman show. Life and death danced together in a way that seems unimaginable today, yet it was perfectly natural for the people of Rome. As you stand there, you start to understand. The smell of Rome isn't just filth or decay, it's a blend of everything the city represents: life, death, victory, defeat, glory, failure, all mixed into one eternal essence. Rome, in its grandeur and its grime, is alive with the weight of its own legacy. You begin walking again, the mausoleums fading behind you, but their influence lingering. Your journey takes you further through the streets, passing by shops selling exotic goods, houses adorned with frescoes, and temples where priests continue their sacred duties. The city is a blend of the earthy and the divine, a place where even the smell of rot is intertwined with something greater, something holy. Soon, you arrive at the Pantheon, the crown jewel of Roman architecture. It's a marvel of engineering, a building that has withstood the test of time. And inside, you find a silence that is almost sacred. The air feels cooler here, as if the breath of the gods still lingers. You stand beneath the massive dome, gazing up at the oculus, the opening to the sky above. The smell here is different. Not foul, not unpleasant. It smells like stone, like age-old incense, like spiritual reverence. There is no sense of decay, no pungency to overwhelm your senses. Instead, you feel a calm, a stillness, a quiet respect for what this building represents. The Pantheon was built as a temple to all the gods of Rome, and even now, it still retains that air of reverence. It's a temple of memory, a place where the divine and the mortal meet. You can almost hear the whispers of those who have come to pray, to give thanks, to seek guidance. And in the air, you feel the presence of the ancients. Here, the scent is pure, almost holy. The stone walls, polished over centuries, the delicate carvings, the smooth marble floors, it all feels timeless. In the presence of such grandeur, the smells of the city outside seem to fade away, as if they no longer matter. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, all is calm, and all is eternal. You sit for a moment, absorbing the serenity. The chaos of Rome, with all its smells and sounds, seems so far away. You're caught in a moment of stillness. You could stay here forever, just listening to the hum of the world outside, but you know you can't. You know that the city, in all its complexity, is waiting for you. You leave the Pantheon and step back into the streets. The noise, the smells, the chaos, it all comes rushing back. But you are different now. The city has imprinted itself on you in ways you didn't expect. You've learned to live with the smells of Rome, the sweetness, the stench, the strange mix of both. And in the end, that's what Rome is, isn't it? A city of contradictions, of beauty and filth, of gods and mortals, of triumph and tragedy. It's a city that embraces both the divine and the mundane. And it's a city that will never, ever be forgotten. You continue walking, the weight of the day pressing on your shoulders. But there's no longer any discomfort in it. You've come to understand the true essence of this place. You've walked its streets, breathed its air, and become a part of its story. And as the night falls, and the city of Rome settles into slumber, you realize something. Rome might be dirty, chaotic, and at times overwhelmingly foul, but it is also alive. And that, in its own way, is the greatest gift of all. The night falls slowly over Rome, the fading light casting long shadows across the city's ancient streets. You find yourself standing at the top of the Capitoline Hill, overlooking the sprawling metropolis. The view is breathtaking, the vast city stretching before you like a living entity, a labyrinth of stone, history, and endless stories. From this height, the noise of the streets fades into a distant murmur. The hustle and bustle of the city becomes a faint hum, barely perceptible. And yet, the smell, the omnipresent, overwhelming stench of life, still hangs in the air. It's strange, isn't it? How you've grown so used to it. You never thought you'd be able to live in this kind of environment, to breathe in the smells of Rome without being repulsed. But now, as the day fades into night, you realize you've become a part of it. Rome's smells, its life, have infiltrated you. There's no denying it. The stench of sweat, urine, and animal carcasses mingles with the sweeter aromas of roasted meats, baking bread, and freshly brewed wine. The city's soul is made of these contradictory smells, just as its people are made of contradictions. You think about the stories you've heard today, about the slaves who worked the baths, the gladiators who fought for their lives, the emperors who lived in luxury while their citizens struggled in the streets. You think about the ancient temples, the forgotten tombs, the orgies and festivals. You think about how everything is connected, how history is written in the very smells of the streets, in the sweat of labor,